Right, you're live.
All right, this is House Education, Wednesday, April 15th. In our sort of tour today of the landscape of Vermont, we're going to turn our attention to teacher workforce and get some just some input from what's going on, what efforts are underway, and sort of what's the status of things. John, I believe we're beginning with you. I'm not quite sure.
I'm happy to defer to my esteemed colleagues.
So I'm happy to have anyone volunteer to be first.
I'll back cleanup.
All right, sounds good. Bob?
Sure, why
Yeah,
not?
all right, great.
Is this the spot?
That's the spot. Just introduce yourself and
Great, sure.
look forward to hearing what you have to say.
I think just in starting, John is probably going to provide a little bit more of a sort of an overall feeling of what's going on in various ways. And I think what I would like to be able to do is provide just a concrete example of what a residency in a teacher residency Vermont might look like. My name is Bob Laird, and I work with the Vermont Mathematics Initiative. I did submit a CV to provide some background so you have a feeling for sort of where I'm coming from and what I've been up to professionally. So as I mentioned, I do hope to provide you a concrete example of what a teacher residency here in Vermont might look like, as well as a brief discussion of some of the issues that would need to be resolved in order for a residency like this to come to fruition in Vermont. So, we know that there's funding and organizational and governance changes on Vermont's education horizon. And we also know that those changes in and of themselves will not address the student learning that we all hope is at the forefront of any of these reforms. I, as well as most educational researchers, would tell you that it's the instruction that every kid gets every single day that has the greatest potential of impacting student learning. This has been the Vermont Mathematics Initiative's central mission since its inception in 1999. So across the ensuing 27 years, over 600 Vermont math teachers have graduated from the VMI. So when John invited us to think about a residency, we were immediately interested because we saw it as a logical extension for our longtime work with in-service math teachers. For us, this is not a fast track to a teaching license in mathematics. The goal is to design a resident program that provides first-year, middle, and high school math teachers the deepest, most comprehensive pre-service training possible. And let me just give you a feel for what we're thinking at the moment. We see it as a 2-year residency for prospective middle and high school math teachers that presently hold a bachelor's degree. So in year 1, the resident would not be a teacher of record. They would complete a practicum, which is a full year in a classroom with what we're calling an expert teacher at this point. The quality of this practicum we've known from the beginning, and we've learned even more and more, is absolutely critical to the success of any residency. I'll talk about that a little bit later because there's some issues involved with that. Also in year 1, the resident would complete 12 academic credits. That's 4 courses. 2 of the courses would take place in the summer prior to the fall residence beginning, 1 each in the fall, 1 and 1 in the spring. They would utilize what we call a cohort structure, meaning that all the residents would work together over the 2 years. It's something that's been really powerful in VMI, and we believe it would transfer here well. Each resident would be assigned a mentor from the VMI as well, who works with them across the 2 years. Another part of what we've done with in-service teachers that we think is a pretty powerful part of actually learning how to be a teacher. And then they would, from day 1, be working on their licensing portfolio across the first year. That would continue into the second year. So after the first year, after successfully completing the first year, that resident would be eligible for a provisional license. We're doing some work right now with the AOE to make that possible. That means they begin the second year as the teacher of record, working under this provisional license. In the second year, they would continue on with their academic coursework. That would be 4 more courses, 12 academic credits. They would continue to work with their VMI mentor. Might be different in year 2 since they're not in with the expert teacher. The mentoring might need to be more intense. It might need to be more on site. And then they would complete their licensing portfolio. A successful completion of the 2 years would make them eligible for a level 1 license with the agreement that they would stay in the school or district for a certain number of years. We've looked across a fair number of residences that are presently underway, and it's 2 or 3 years, something like that seems reasonable. So our current work is thinking about how you would get something like this off the ground. So what we're aiming for would be to launch a small scale residency in the summer of 2027 in one region of the state. We'd be looking for 4 to 6 residents, 4 to 6 expert teachers, as well as their respective districts and schools. We would see this essentially as a proof of concept study. We have some ideas of what we would want to get out of that. In order to make that happen, there's a few things on the to-do list. One is to build a regional partnership with a region for a small scale study, but bigger than that, it's in preparation for a future scale up that we would envision would utilize a regional structure. We need to complete the ROPA, which we've started on right now, that would allow us to issue level 1 licenses. And we'd need to figure out funding, which if it's like, and it probably would be other residencies, it would be a combination of district, state, and external funding, as well as a minimal contribution from individual residents. That money would go towards new development. It would go towards administration, the year 1 salary for the residents, which is an essential part of all the residencies that we looked at across the country. It'd go towards academic credits, and perhaps it would be compensation for expert teachers. It could be some other incentives for those teachers, but money could be part of that. As I mentioned earlier, we realized that from the start, a strong cadre of expert math teachers is really essential for success. Making this happen is problematic in Vermont due to the rural makeup and the relatively small middle and high schools that we have across the state. In fact, even our larger high schools have relatively few math teachers. We learned from John Fisher, who some of you may know, who was the former Vermont Deputy Commissioner of Education, that other rural states experienced this exact same problem. In fact, in our correspondence with him, he wrote that this is actually the most common failure point for teacher residencies in rural states. So with this in mind, we have a plan how to deal with it. It involves recruiting and training a cadre of expert math teachers that presently doesn't exist. I'm not saying we don't have great math teachers. I'm saying that cadre does not exist. And we believe they need a specialized set of skills and knowledge for this role if we're really serious about turning out the best young teachers, new teachers that we can. For example, they're going to need to model expert instruction and classroom management daily. They need to be able to mentor residents that we imagine would come in with a variety of experiences in classrooms and in schools, or no experience at all. They need to deeply understand the competencies required for licensing, and they need to be able to motivate and inspire our next generation of teachers. We also realize that recruiting and training expert math teachers does not ensure that an expert teacher is available at all Vermont middle and high schools. To address this issue, we're presently thinking about a hub structure that would require regional partners. This is one reason we had reached out to Jill at the Vermont Learning Collaborative a couple months ago. In a hub structure, a resident might complete the year one of the residency with an expert teacher at a nearby school. This means we would be thinking about creating regional pockets of expert teachers that could serve partner schools in designated regions.
Only there were some sort of structure that could be set up to do that. I'm being sarcastic.
I totally get the joke. A resident would then complete year two of that residency back at their home school as a teacher of record. This structure, we believe, would ultimately make it possible for any prospective resident to access a highly trained master teacher, no matter the location of the school or the resident's hometown. I just want to end with what I believe is a central component of success for this and any other educational initiative. I've worked across the past 20 years on a number of relatively large-scale math education initiatives whose goal is increased student learning. All the successful ones share a common feature, and that is they begin with a clear, systemic vision and a comprehensive plan for successful implementation. Most educational initiatives, in my experience, that fail not because they don't hold promise, but they fail the systemic challenge. I'm excited about the promise of a high-quality residency for new math teachers, but honestly, I'm hesitant because we presently do not have a statewide vision or a clear plan that one would expect given the magnitude of the issue. You know, John's dogged work in this area is essential, and we wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for him and the assistance we continue to receive from Carolyn Weir at the McClure Foundation and several folks at the AOE is important to our current development. Yet, we're beginning this work without a plan for success, which, as I see it, is the creation of a robust, comprehensive initiative that actually addresses the shortage of highly trained teachers across Vermont. This is a systemic issue, and systemic issues require systemic approaches. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be here and talk about something that's really dear to our heart, which is quality instruction for all kids across the state of Vermont. And I want to thank you for all you're doing for our Vermont students and schools. So thank you.
Yeah. We don't leave yet. So your sort of target resident would be a new college graduate with an interest in being a math teacher, or would it be more somebody who's following a different pathway to a teaching life?
Yeah, both that. I mean, some of the data suggests that there's people out there who are interested in education, interested in being teachers, but they can't leave their job, for example, to go do this. And so the residents, and we've heard from schools that will say, we have an instructional assistant that would make a great middle school math teacher, but how do we do that? And so the residency, I think, is an attempt at that. It could be a new college grad who tried out engineering and said, not for me, but I would be interested in becoming a math teacher. Yeah, so that's who those would be.
Very ambitious plan.
You think?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm just curious, you said, there would be this agreement that you would stay in the state for X amount of years, we figure that out. So what would happen if that agreement wasn't fulfilled at the end? Like, would the teacher's license be suspended? Would they owe back some fee?
Those are all good questions that are at a depth that we haven't looked at this point. But I think it begs the idea of what The actual contractual situation would be for a person who's a resident. Now, I understand that there might be some present types of contracts that might work that are presently at work here in Vermont. I know other states have dealt with that in various ways around what that contract might actually look like going in.
I would think from a sort of union perspective, one might say, okay, we can make an exception knowing that you've got hopefully a lifelong union member once the process is complete.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's one of those to-do lists to figure out how that all would work. I mean, I think what we have to remember is we're inventing something brand new here that doesn't exist. You mentioned the structure doesn't exist to support it. The expert math teachers, the cadres we need that would be strategically stationed across the state does not exist. And I think the paradigm in most people's heads across the state is that prospective teachers just come to us and they apply for a job and we hire them. And that whole paradigm just has to change. And the paradigm that we all have to be involved in that recruitment, and we might even have to pony up some money for that recruitment, is a paradigm shift that many people, I think, are at the beginning of seeing, but I'm not sure we understand what that's going to take going forward. And I think we have to be ambitious enough to think that systemically we can pull this off if we really believe it's important.
I'm wondering, I heard you say coursework during the first year and also during the second year. At the end, are they earning a master's degree?
So
Where are they at?
At the VMI, presently, it's a 36 credit master's degree. So they would actually be 2/3 of their way through that master's degree. If they chose to, and we figured out another layer, they could seamlessly enter the VMI for their last year. So they would be essentially 12 credits away from a master's degree. Some residencies across the state actually are looking for a master's degree beyond that. It's possible that we could sort of rethink that, but it would require, I think, a little more academic work than we presently have thought about.
I only asked the question because I went to the University of Vermont. I got a bachelor's in math and then I did the 1 year to get the master's degree. And when you get that first job, having the master's degree, having that earning power is really important.
Sure.
So I wonder if maybe instead of finishing the 2 years with 2/3, if there was a way to get the other third in the summer, either the summer before you get started or the summer in between, or both summers, so
Sure.
that they don't end up postponing that earned income power.
Yeah, totally understand. It's something we've really talked about. And, yes, it would have to be,
Those kids are struggling, like we have them in our schools right now. I teach at U32 and
yeah,
they struggle with the finances.
sure.
You're paying for school. Yes, you're getting your master's degree, but you're basically working for free in a school for a whole year. So there's that part too, whereas if you were part of this, you would be paid, right,
During that first year, and then the second year, they would be
exactly.
teacher of record, and I assume that salary would be higher than probably that first year, I'm assuming. So we would really have to think about condensing that, because we thought a residency of 3 years would be too much. So it would have to be condensed within those 2 years, I think. Yeah.
We've got,
Yeah, well, I think it's gonna come, you say, like, you're saying first here, but not first in I think, John, you're probably gonna take us there to sort of, because you follow this nationally a lot, but of what is happening in terms of teacher workforce and pathways into teaching in other states that, we wouldn't be the first ever. We would actually be learning what is happening in a lot of other states, particularly rural states, but teacher workforce issues are a challenge nationally.
Great. Thank you.
all right, well, I'll play MC. I guess maybe go to Juliet Longchamp.
Everyone can see me?
Yep.
I just want to move this over. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to share the work that Vermont NEA is doing to support the teacher, the educator workforce. My name is Juliette Longchamp. I serve as the Director of Professional Programs at Vermont NEA. I'm a licensed Vermont educator, well licensed. I'm licensed in elementary ed, special ed, and middle grades math, science, English language arts, and social studies. And I also am a board certified teacher along with Kate McCann, my friend here in the committee. So hello, Kate. I also hold a doctorate in educational leadership and policy studies from the University of Vermont. So this background really allows me to work well with multiple teachers across content areas. And the work that I'm going to share with you today is work that really came out of the 22-23 Senate committee meetings where they asked Vermont NEA to take our peer review support program to scale. Aside from the programs I'm going to talk with you about today, as part of my role at Vermont NEA, I support ESP mentoring programs. I coordinate different trainings in districts. I support teachers pursuing national board certification, which is a voluntary certification. There are currently 85 current NBCTs in classrooms today in Vermont. And I'm also a Danielson Framework Specialist, so districts will ask me to facilitate trainings around the Danielson Framework for Teaching, which about 80% of the districts in Vermont use as in their teacher evaluation system. So Vermont NEA has been involved in 2 programs to strengthen the work of the teacher workforce. The first one, again, started in the 22-23 school year, which is called our Grow Vermont Ed program. I was lucky enough during that year to have a fellow, Barbie Collette, who worked with me full time as part of her fellowship, and we built this program together. Currently, I am working with 134 teachers have completed portfolios, and we have 100 teachers in both of our programs that are in the process of completing peer review portfolios. Tomorrow, you're going to hear from the Agency of Education, and they will add to that because I'm working very closely with them in both of these 2 programs. So Grow Vermont Ed is our straight sort of peer review support program. The typical candidate in this program is somebody that was hired on a provisional license because there were no licensed educators in the application pool. So we work through, it's a year-long program. They begin in the fall. They complete their portfolio, their peer review portfolio in between 10 and 12 months. Those people that are in their second year of their provisional license have a condensed schedule because they need to have their portfolios completed in time for the review and for, prior to their license expiring at the end of June. Those that are in year 1 of their license, provisional license, which we prefer, they have 2 years. So if they don't finish it up the first year, they have that summer and fall to complete their portfolio. So by the time their provisional license expires, they will have completed their portfolio. In the testimony, and I'm not going to go through it, but I did put the number of people we have in the years in our Grow Vermont Ed program. So we started with 77 participants. This year we have 42 participants. Our completion rate in that year 1 is around 80%, which is significant because according to the Agency of Education, before this program started, people that applied for certification through the peer review program, only about 30% actually submitted portfolios. So with the support, we're at 80%. So we think that's definitely contributing to our teacher workforce. So we are in year 4 of the program to date. Every year we improve on it. The first year, for example, we met 1 day a week for 3 hours and everything was synchronous. Teachers were tired at the end of a working day. They were new educators. They had just so much capacity. That next year we completely flipped instruction. So they had modules to complete prior to every asynchronous seminar, which was cut in half. And we had a lot of time for breakout groups where they could really collaborate with each other. And we felt that it felt more like a cohort. So that was one thing that was one change that we made after year 1 that was really important to just make it more doable for the capacity of these new educators. 2 years ago, and we're going to hear from John Castle, with his leadership, Vermont NEA was brought on to support the supplemental instruction of the Vermont Registered Teacher Apprentice Program. This program is a real collaborative. So we partnered with John and the Vermont Rural Education Collaborative, the Agency of Education, the Department of Labor, and the school districts to support, again, provisionally licensed teachers because there were no properly licensed educators in the application pool, and support them through the process of completing their peer review portfolio. We basically copied the same module, so we didn't have to recreate things. We used what we had created through our Grow Vermont Ed program. We tweaked it a bit because as part of the Registered Teacher Apprenticeship Program, there was much more support. So a new teacher is assigned an additional mentor. It could be their school-based mentor, but they had the additional responsibility of really going through the competencies for their content area with their apprentice teacher. They had support. The superintendent had to apply on behalf of that registered teacher apprentice. The administrator is the one who meets with the apprentice teacher and signs off on the competencies for their licensure area. And then they have their seminar every week that's facilitated by Vermont NEA. We have 2 board certified teachers, Lily Foster and Martha Santa Maria, who are leading the seminars with me. And actually at this point in the year, they have really taken over those seminars. So they're facilitating those weekly seminars, and we're all providing feedback on their certification portfolios in a way that's very formative. So they complete a section, we provide feedback, and they revise based on that feedback. So we are in year 2 of the apprenticeship program. We had 27 people last year. We had 70% complete. 70% of those 27 people are complete. The one person just completed yesterday. So we're a little bit higher. I think we have 3 more yet to complete their portfolios, and they're on track. So this year we have 36 people, and we have 3 people that have completed so far. The other data that we are collecting in both of these programs, which I think is really important, is how many are still employed by Vermont schools. So of our first cohort, our 22-23 cohort, 80% of them are still working in the schools. So that's a really great picture because we want a stable workforce. We want new teachers to grow in their schools and in their profession. And the way to do that is to really support them throughout. The typical candidate, and I'm not sure if there is a typical candidate, most of them are members of their communities. So they're already connected. But as far as we have some that are in their 50s, some people that are in their 40s, some people that are in their 20s in both of the programs. And I wouldn't say there is everyone has their own story and their own pathway to this wonderful career of teaching. I listed the 11 districts on my testimony that we are currently working with. We started with 9, we're now at 11. So we added Slate Valley Supervisory Union and Burlington School District this year. And then we started it with the 8 districts, or the 9 districts in the Northeast Kingdom. One of the things that, as we look and reflect on the 2 programs, there is something very different about the apprenticeship program. The peer review program, a teacher is hired and there is no responsibility to support them in getting their license. They have professional learning, PD credits that they can use, but it's really up to the teacher to navigate which pathway is going to be best for them. I will say, often I get somebody in the second year of their provisional license, they thought they could do it on their own and they need support. With the apprenticeship program, systematically that support is built in and there is responsibility for the teacher, the mentor, the mentee, the apprentice teacher, the principal, the superintendent, Vermont NEA as the facilitator of the supplemental instruction. And that support is really important. So if I could take my magic wand, I would want everybody that chooses the peer review pathway to be a part of the apprenticeship program because of the support. We're asking new educators to go into a classroom and do the very important work of teaching without some. Again, they all have such a wide range of experience, but without, the skills to be, profession ready the minute they get in the classroom. So we have to accelerate that growth so they can be as successful as they can. One of the things for both of these programs that I think is really positive is that people are getting their license without going into debt. We know that a lot of the people with whom we are working have mortgages, they need a job, so having that $1,200 peer review fee waived and using their course reimbursement, that's part of their collective bargaining agreement, has allowed them to do this hard work without impacting their family finances. Next year, I'm assuming both programs are going to will continue. We are already thinking about things that we want to do to tweak the programs. And that's just part of our continuous improvement mindset. The other thing that I wanted to discuss, and I didn't have this in my initial testimony, is the paraeducator support. So we think about our education workforce, it's not just teachers. We know our support staff is so critical in making our schools work. And our paraeducators who are in the classrooms with teachers are also important. And one of the programs that we have started in Vermont with districts is a paraeducator mentoring program. We received a couple of grants from the National Education Association Center for Great Public School to support paraeducator mentoring. I think our 2 leading districts right now are Colchester and Champlain Valley, led by Carmel Quinn and Gloria Matagueras. They really have set the standard for paraeducator mentoring. Rutland Northeast just launched their program. Developing a program is not, it includes a collaborative. So it's, administrator, a teacher, multiple paras learning together and preparing for that paraeducator mentoring program for that next year. And one of the things that we are seeing with these programs is that the retention of paraeducators is higher in those districts. It is also, for some paraeducators, a launching pad to a career as a teacher. So that paraeducator to teacher route is really supported by a paraeducator mentoring program. So we are really happy to be working with, we have several paraeducators in our Grow Vermont Ed program that are working with their districts to find a student teaching or the equivalent. They've been really excited about that. And then I believe you'll hear sometime this week, the CCV VTSU is launching a program in the fall, paraeducator to teacher program. Representatives of CCV and VTSU had a table at our ESP conference last week and spoke with a lot of support staff members that might be interested. So that's the work that we're doing at Vermont NEA, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And I know that Colin is in the room, so Colin, if you have anything to add, please do so.
We're getting a head shake from Colin. Thank you very much. That was very comprehensive. And thanks for really talking about the difference between the two programs.
Yeah.
That was very helpful to me as well. Just in the consideration of time, I think we'll move right on to Jill Graham,
Okay.
so that we have time for John at the end.
Great. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. I am happy to defer to John. My testimony will be quick, so if John would like to go first.
Go right ahead, Jill.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Again, it's nice to see you again. The question that was asked to me is, how can cooperative educational service areas help to facilitate teacher development and introduction into the workforce? And so what I wanted to present to you today was that there are models and there is precedence that exists for this work of educational service agencies really serving as ed prep partners within their respective states and regions. And the model I want to share with you is from Wisconsin, who also uses CESA for their educational service agencies. It's very well developed, and it also includes an educator induction support program in addition to the preparation program. And then I'd like to share with you a model concept that was discussed earlier this year by Vermont Learning Collaborative as a result of a private grant opportunity that we applied for. So essentially in Wisconsin, there are 12 CESAs total in the state, and out of those 12, 5 of them offer state-approved educator preparation programs. They all are similar in that they support bachelor level candidates with initial licensure or seeking additional certification, additional teacher certification. And they offer variable, flexible access to coursework for completion in order to earn their certification as a teacher. And that's across multiple licensure headings, right? So not just special education, also content teachers, foreign language teachers, early childhood. So it's a broad array of licensure areas that they can support. Some of them partner with local universities or colleges in order to offer master's program credits for those teachers as well. So again, I think it's important to know that there is precedence for these agencies helping to support educator preparation programs. They also administer a really high quality teacher induction program. And I think this is just as important as getting our teachers certified and supported into the workforce, which we know is a major issue for Vermont as well as the nation as a whole. But this teacher induction program is really designed to support the retention, and it's targeted for new special education teachers because of the body of research around retention within that particular workforce. So it targets special education teachers during their first 3 years in the profession. It includes professional learning, instructional coaching, and then a structured support network. What's interesting is that this induction program that is run by the Educational Service Agencies is funded by the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, and they use IDEA discretionary grant funds to support that program. So as I said earlier this year, our agency had the opportunity to apply for a private grant, and based on the stakeholder feedback of our region, there was a really strong interest in developing an educator preparation program within the region that specifically targeted provisionally licensed special education teachers or paraprofessionals who were bachelor's level, who were interested in teaching or interested in receiving their certificate. So we created a sort of a high level overview that went into our application, and I've listed that here, but it really talks just about, you know, a collaborative group and the opportunity to really do a deep needs assessment to look and benchmark programs that exist statewide, because there's some really strong programs, as Juliet just outlined, and Bob just outlined, already existing within the state. So what do those look like? And then what are some national models as well? We know that there would need to be strategic partners with the Agency of Education, and we've had some early conversations with them, as well as collaboration with an institution of higher learning. So again, you know, this overview really just tracks kind of what our idea and what our concept was for this grant. The grant was intended to provide planning opportunities so that an early stage idea could be funded into fruition. So our hope had been to be able to use those funds to develop this program with a launch of July 2027 for first enrollment. I am sad to say that unfortunately, we learned that this competitive grant opportunity was highly competitive, and we did not receive funding. But ultimately, just in summary, I think it's important to note that there is a model that exists nationally through Wisconsin, for example, that shows that educational service agencies are capable of administering licensure pathway programs, as well as structured induction support. And I think that that's a precedent as we consider how to move forward with educator preparation and retention in the state.
Thanks very much. And it's always, when we talk about CSAs and their sort of abilities to perhaps save money, I always have to remind myself, and they also have the ability to go after money that is often left on the table when applying for grants, whether they be federal or private. So it's a good reminder. Thank you. John, you're up.
Thank you.
Morning, everybody. Nice to see everyone again. John Katz, I'm the Executive Director for the Vermont Rural Education Collaborative. We work with 8 supervisory unions and supervisory districts, primarily in the Northeast Kingdom, or as I say, Northeast Kingdom plus. So we have a little Orange County and Royal County and some of our districts. First thing I want to do is just recognize the hard work that you've all been doing this year. Certainly, we know it's a heavy lift to try to figure out a path forward around governance and funding in our state, and recognize how hard it is. I've often reflected upon your work, thinking about my work as a former superintendent, and I once said to my leadership team, there's no end to the opportunity for me to disappoint you. Similar time, I remember saying to my wife, you know, I said, I'm just so tired of being a superintendent. I just disappoint people all the time. She goes, but you're so good at it.
Superpower.
Really sure what she meant by that. Anyway, so I know it's hard work. And thank you for first the opportunity for Jess and Bernice to talk about community schools. That's something I feel very strongly about, as I think some of you know, and I think that's really an important initiative to continue to keep on your radar to help support. What I would say about workforce is, you know, glad you're having a variety of us in today, and I know you'll have some folks from the agency, Andrew, and I think Amelia coming in tomorrow. And I'm kind of defer to them on sort of the deeper dive around the data, the current data, and I'll just sort of talk more globally. But it really is important that you hear from a real cross-section of people in the field, right? So you're hearing from higher ed, you're hearing from people at the agency, you're hearing from the, hopefully, Department of Labor at some point, member organizations, there's quite a number of perspectives. And what's important about that is that we all have some similar goals to improve and support the educator workforce, but we're often working in disparate ways, right? And I think Bob talked to that a little bit, how important it is to really have a more comprehensive or cohesive vision for educator workforce. And I think that's yet to emerge. But I think, there's a lot of partners out there, a lot of organizations and educators, certainly our school districts, the field itself, I think are really important to hear from all of them. So I'm just one perspective. I feel like I've immersed myself in this work over the last 2 or 3 years. Ever since I reached out to Dan French back in the fall of 2022 and said, Dan, what is the agency doing around teacher workforce needs? And he said, maybe we need a third party like VREC to jump in and do something. So, we appreciate that we've been a player in this and a partner in this. I won't go through my whole list of things, but you can see in my written testimony, we are very engaged in different ways. For instance, we were very much a part of ramping up and developing the registered apprenticeship program. But now I am no longer involved in that. That's up and running and that's moving forward. And that's something Amelia is doing with the agency. But I think we feel very strongly, given the profile of our region in the Northeast Kingdom and hearing from superintendents, and I'm going to be on the phone with them in another 20 minutes talking about a large grant, hopefully in support of workforce development, whether to go after it or not, and depending on what their view is. But I think the needs persist. And I think one of the things that we need to understand, this is no longer just a crisis mode of the pandemic. Sure, we are still feeling the tail of the pandemic to some extent, but this is just the dynamic that we are facing in our country in terms of employment, public education, demographics in Vermont. There's a whole host of things. And certainly, I'm sure Andrew will have the data about, continued numbers of people on emergency and provisional licenses that really surpass the number of people entering the field through traditional educational prep programs. Those are incredibly important programs. And the last thing I want to do is ever to promote that we need to move everything to alternative and non-traditional pathways. Those traditional pathways are still incredibly important. I think there's sometimes a need for some modifications and changes, but ultimately they are very important in this whole ecosystem. And I guess that's the way I would encourage you to think about this, is the entire continuum of the profession. Yes, getting people in the door, getting them pathways to become teachers, to become licensed, to become early educators with a lot of support and mentoring and all of that. But we really do need to be addressing career teachers, right? How do we support them? Like the work that VMI has done. And I'm sure many of the people, Bob, that you've had in your program are people that have been teaching 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but still are benefiting immensely with the intensive content and pedagogy from a program like VMI. We need to make sure that stays on our radar. We're looking at ways that we can support teacher development. So we have been very fortunate to benefit from some grant funding from the Rowland Foundation, their new teacher grant program. And so Jess has worked with me on that, is a teacher innovation grant. And so we are providing resources for teachers to spark their growth and to develop their interest, to kind of give them a little bit of a surge. We're instituting a retreat this year called our Reflection and Rejuvenation Retreat, because there are a lot of teachers out there that are just, I think, really don't know sometimes where they are. Maybe Erin, you want to come up?
Yes,
right?
I'll come.
We'll put you on
Always
the
want
list.
to be rejuvenated.
But I think we need to make sure that we're thinking of the whole continuum. Yes, the onboarding, yes, the recruitment is important, but if we're losing fewer teachers, there are fewer positions to replace. So we need to be thinking about all of that support, I think is really important. I don't know how much depth you want me to go into, but I think really to say is that we all recognize that, teacher quality is probably one of the most important things. And I think we're hearing that from other people today, and I'm sure you'll hear that from Andrew tomorrow as well, is that if we're really committed to transforming education and learning outcomes for students, we have to invest in teacher quality, right? That can't be the traditional mode, is that, well, we have EPPs out there and we have peer review and that's kind of it. And yes, there's some professional development going on. There has to be a much more comprehensive approach to how we do things. There are some specific things that I did want to speak to in terms of recommendations that I would make to this committee. The Emerging Pathways Grant. So that was an appropriation from several years ago. That was $500,000. Certainly VREC benefited from that. That was enabled us to do the work with VMI. We had reached out to VMI, Champlain, UVM, and the Higher Ed Collaborative to look at the idea of residency models, and VMI has really taken off on that, and really appreciate the opportunity to work with Bob and others at VMI. But I think that kind of seed money, that ability to spur some new ideas and build some capacity, I think is important. So revisiting that, it may look different in a new context. But for instance, if we were trying to launch a residency program, it is resource intensive. And it's a lot to ask school districts, keep your budgets down, but meanwhile, build your teaching staff and pay somebody who's not even the teacher of record, right? So if we can supplement that, I think we can have a proof of concept. And I do think there's other philanthropic support and other foundations out there that would support that if there's the ability to braid that kind of funding. So I think, again, trying to restore some Emerging Pathways program, I think would really be good. It's not, it's been done before. I think it's something that could be launched again. One of the areas, and I'll jump a little bit here, but the forgivable loan program. So that came out pretty much at the same time. That was administered by VSAC. I don't know the particular ins and outs right now, other than I know that those resources have been depleted. It's my perception and understanding that we actually may have some students that benefited from those resources that now don't have those resources, that may exit their programs and then have to repay back the forgivable loan. So I don't know that would be a VSAP question, but that's a perception I have, and I've heard that. So I'm concerned that there are individuals out there that we induced into becoming teachers that are now caught in this inability to finish without that level of support. So I don't know if there's a way to address that, but I think in order to really see the kind of growth we need, you need both the investment in entrepreneurial ideas and new pathways and supporting those pathways, as well as the kinds of access to people entering the field so that they're not incurring debt and they're looking at becoming a teacher in a way that's truly an inducement, right? That if I'm going to get my degree and it's going to be essentially paid for, that would be a huge benefit to attracting people into the profession. So I think that's an area. I would say one of the areas I really wanted to emphasize is just the leadership and capacity at the agency. And I've been very fortunate to work directly with Andrew, and I know Andrew's role has changed a little bit as a division leader, and he has some other responsibilities. Amelia Wurzburg, who is hired under a Department of Labor funding opportunity over the last couple of years, has been great to work with. But if we're really going to have a comprehensive and coordinated approach to teacher workforce development, it has to have the leadership of the agency, and they need the resources to do that, obviously. So being able to sustain that position, perhaps not having it funded by grant funds, those grant funds could be supporting other parts of workforce development, mentoring programs, other things like, the resources that we had when we started the registered apprenticeship program, taking away fees for people to take the praxis test and things like that. So there are other ways I think we want to eliminate the hurdles. And I'm not going to go down the entire list here, but I've given you quite a list of things. If you were to look at that and say, that's probably more than one person, right? And that's a lot of resources. But for instance, an example around this would be the need, Juliet talked about the partnership that existed between Department of Labor, the Agency of Education, Vermont NEA, and VREC was really amazing. And I think we don't see partnerships of that magnitude across the state, but it's going to take that level of partnership with higher ed and other agencies and other organizations for us to address this issue. But it takes time and energy and leadership to do that. I mentioned in here, Teach Colorado. We need a one-stop shop, comprehensive place that if I want to be a teacher, I go to that spot. I still field lots of calls. I'm always willing to talk to people, whether they're in the VREC catchment or not. I get calls from all over the state. I want to be a teacher. How do I do this in Vermont? It's like, but I'll talk them through and then pass them on to Amelia. But we currently don't have a portal that really helps people figure out, I'm at this starting point and I have a BA, right? But I need to go this pathway. If I have a master's, I can go this pathway. I don't have a BA and I'm a paraeducator, I can go this pathway. And certainly, you know, I think you'll hear tomorrow a little bit of the work around VSU, right? And the para pathway to become a teacher. That's really exciting. I was a part of, you know, nudging and encouraging a lot of that early on, but I'm no longer necessarily involved in that, but very pleased and appreciate VSU's commitment to that. But there are other amazing programs happening across the country and much larger investments by the state to support teacher growth. And take a look, if you have a chance sometime, at the Rural Teacher Corps. There's a number of schools, universities and state universities, mostly in the Midwest, that have really combined together. They've received some grant funding to support the ability to teach teachers the nuances and the interest of teaching in rural communities and what it means to integrate things like place-based education and such. So there are many layers. We need to look at all of the layers. I know we can't do everything, but the bottom line is we really need to make investments if we are going to grow our teacher workforce and sustain a teacher workforce that has the highest quality. The last thing I would say to that is, and I think we all recognize that, like, your jobs are difficult and you're used to people giving you flack, right? People aren't going to be happy. But teachers feel under the gun these days, right? We hear too much rhetoric that I think denigrates public education, right? We have too much rhetoric that sometimes degrades small rural schools, right? Our small rural schools are doing amazing things. Think about these innovation grants that we're doing. We have teachers that are just incredible at what they're doing. And we need to shine a light on that and tell a positive narrative. At the same time, recognize the challenge. I'm not saying it's all perfect. We can't achieve all the things we want to achieve, given some of the limitations we have and some of the geography we have and all of that. But we do need to continue to have a strong, positive voice and narrative for our public school teachers and our public school employees at every level, and the hard work they do, which is so meaningful day in and day out. So that's my pitch.
Thank you. And I'll thank you for not bringing it right down to, we don't have enough housing, which is where we usually end up. Could you just talk very briefly, like, so why are we here? Is it because we have an aging teaching force? Because we really should be needing fewer teachers given our demographics. But I'm assuming that probably the amount of departure due to age or whatever from the teacher workforce is outpacing. So adjusting to the
It's
changes.
a combination of things. And so again, thinking about, you know, how much we've promoted flexible pathways and multiple pathways for students, we need to be thinking about multiple pathways for onboarding people to become teachers. There are multiple pathways out, right? So part of it is just the demographics of people, you know, getting to retirement age and retiring. We have people that are coming in, you know, Julia talked about the success rate with Grow Vermont Ed, with the scaffolding they support for people going through peer review. But I can tell you as a superintendent, we had people come in under provisional license, stay for 2 years, and then they're gone. They never completed their license. So if we don't give them the support, so that idea of a residency model, that you have this long on-ramp. So we're losing retirees, but we're also losing people that are 1 year in, 2 years in, 3 years in, because they say, this is hard work, right? And it's hard to get my license at the same time I'm trying to become a teacher. Some of it's just the economics, right? We certainly need to pay teachers well, right? In all regions of the state. And I know that's a challenge, but that's something that if we want to retain teachers and attract teachers, if you're a 24-year-old leaving college and you're looking at, you know, interviewing for jobs and you're going to start salaries $70,000, $80,000, $100,000, it's hard to say I'm going to become a teacher at $42,000, right? So all of those things I think we have to be addressing. If we're thinking about the entire ecosystem, why are people leaving? They're discouraged. They're not feeling supported, the challenges, if we're not addressing things like through community schools, student mental health and chronic absenteeism, all of those factors, I think, are influencing our teaching staff. We are not going to solve it through consolidation of schools, right? And I get it, right? I was somebody, I've had conversations with people. You can't have 7 kids in a classroom. You can't have 8 kids in a classroom. You need to go to a multi-age classroom, right? You have no choice, right? You can't justify it. So I get it. We can't sustain some very small classrooms, but whether it's minimum class size legislation through Act 73 or consolidation, that's not going to solve our problem. If you look at the data from the McClure Department of Labor study, we are going to need more teachers, but it's not just bodies, right? This isn't about fast tracking people to get a license. It's like what Bob is saying. We need to invest in teachers being the highest quality possible, starting in their profession and ongoing in their profession.
Go ahead.
Well, 5 minutes over.
That's right. Go ahead.
Isn't the nationwide data, just in terms of the numbers of people, young people, especially going through the traditional path, like,
Yes.
undergrad going into, is way down. I mean, that's a national trend. And again, I'm sure Andrew will. Also, the very beginning of the pipeline and the most traditional pipeline is greatly diminished.
Yeah. And again, we have our NEK Next Gen teachers. So we convene high schools and career center people because we're trying to promote secondary students to pursue careers. So it's traditional pathways are a really important pathway. So we want to make sure, but we're not going to solve it. We need multiple pathways. We need the registered apprenticeship program for teachers of record. We need a registered apprenticeship program for paras to become, get a BA. We need, a residency model. We need all of those models, right, to cover the attrition we're having in the profession.
Great. Thank you very much, John.
Does the rejuvenation retreat come with PT credits towards relicensure?
We're going to stop here. You guys can discuss